have traveled, I have wandered, pondered on the cruelty that I see all around. So much heartache, so much sadness, love and some forgiveness when you put the baton down. Arian, why don't you wake up, wake up? Why don't you face it all? Arian, why don't you rise up and tear down that wall? Arian, I feel your prison. Don't complain, well that's the wisdom, so the cycle goes around. Just accept it's what you're used to. Keep that smile on, cause it's sure to pull you through. Arian, why don't you wake up, wake up? Why don't you face it all? Arian, why don't you rise up and tear down that wall? Didn't nobody love you, didn't nobody like you, make you feel special, or live to delight you. How else could you know that you're free as a bird? Free as a bird.
Welcome to the Friends of Dan Music Podcast. I'm Dan Miles. You've been listening to the music of Judith Owen. That was called Ariane. Can be found on her Somebody's Child album, which we're going to be spotlighting today. You may recall Judith was my guest on episode 71 of the podcast, back when she had just released her previous album, Ebb and Flow. If you missed it, I highly recommend checking it out because it was a lot of fun. And speaking of fun, back for even more fun and games, joining me on the Skype from Los Angeles is Judith Owen. Welcome back.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me back. Thank you.
Well, before we get to your latest album, which is sensational, by the way, and I really love it.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah.
Let's catch up on some other business. How's Sister Susan?
Sister Susan is fantastic. She's here with me right now. She came over to have a bit of a holiday. I was in Ireland. She came over, and we just did the 4th of July together at the Hollywood Bowl. So it doesn't get more fun than that. That's all I can tell you.
I saw the very red, white, and blue photos you posted on Facebook.
It's one of the great things about being, being able to have fun with a situation like that. Ultimately, it's the 4th of July commemorates the Americans getting away from the Brits. So we find it a real joy and enjoy ourselves completely every year.
Yes, I know. I have friends who are English, either citizens of England or, repurposed over here. And I always wonder how they feel about that. Hooray, we're not that anymore. It seems a little bit awkward.
Well, you know what? I honestly, I can't. I think it makes sense to me. Don't blame you. I think it's all quite fantastic. So it's just there's an irony to it that makes us chuckle. But yeah, I enjoy it, and I certainly had a great time the other night.
And also, we're talking about 1776. It's not like it was a couple
of
years.
It's a few hundred years ago. I think we can let bygones be bygones at this point. I'm not going to hold on. I'm not going to bear a grudge. Dan. I'm not.
Yeah, well, I think I've heard British politicians say America is their favorite country, and I know there are a lot of Anglophiles here, and we're so connected. And of course, you and I as musicians, my goodness, I mean, English music, American music, and the cross-pollination there. That's a 7-part podcast right there talking about that.
Yeah, that's pretty much a 3-act play, but I think we all know that the Brits, what we do best, I believe, is to take American music and do something very strange and British with it, and then send it back to America. That's what I think. I think that that's really our thing. We love American music. We love Americana. We love country now. We're completely obsessed with country music, and I think that's what we do. It's a real thing of ours.
I know you've been out on the road a lot since we last spoke. Have you had any further adventures to rival the legend of Yami, or is that just impossible to top?
Nothing could rival Yanni.
Yeah.
Nothing in this world. I mean, Lee and I are still grieving for his loss. I don't believe we went back to the market, just to explain to the listeners and anybody that's seen on the Fabulous Leland Club Facebook page. We found this incredible yam, which is you'd think a yam, that can't be so extraordinary. No, it's a Jamaican yam, and it was in London we found it, and it basically looked like the most powerful set of male genitalia you've ever seen in your entire life. It was a thing of beauty, was yam, and we took him on the road as a mascot, and he travelled all over America. Believe it or not, I brought him as an art piece. I don't know what they must have thought when they saw him in my luggage, by the way, because I put him in my luggage and brought him over to America for the American tour a couple of years ago. And I don't even know what they must have thought, but it looked like an art piece or something very, very frightening. And we took him all over America. And then finally, he literally, at a show we were doing at the Grammy Museum, his head fell off. Because it's a yam, so it was basically rotting from the inside out, because we'd been on the road now for 4 months, and we gave him a state burial in my front garden. So it was one of the funniest things imaginable, because this thing just took on another life, and it had its own fans and Facebook fans and people were going crazy for yam, because we'd put him in all these situations where it's looking like he was like driving the bus, looking at the windows of the bus. And then during the gigs, during the tour, I would bring him out. I bring him out just to show the audience, and there would usually be scenes of horror and of joy from the audience. Nothing's ever come close to challenging his powers.
Yeah, you've been doing a lot of shows sharing the bill with Brian Ferry, which is an inspired combination. Yep. Is it true that you're supposed to perform with him at the Albert Hall, and then when the show got canceled, you invited the audience over to your house?
Yes. It's very unusual for me, because even though I sound like, a chatty, friendly person, I'm sort of a very, very, I'm a very serious person who likes to laugh a lot, but I'm also somebody who's very private too. And 20 minutes before doing the Albert Hall, the word came down that it was cancelled, because Brian's voice was really, really shot, because he had such a bad throat infection. And, that was shocking to everyone. I mean, that was heartbreaking, and you feel so let down, because you're 20 minutes from from doing it, and the audience were already piling into the Albert Hall. So it means a lot to us Brits playing at the Albert Hall. It really is a very special place. It means something very important. And I said words that my husband Harry said. I never thought I would ever hear you saying this, but I actually said the words, "Everyone back to my place," and. There were people, journalists and friends and all sorts of people that had flown in from Europe and come in especially to see this and to write about it and cover it. So we all went back to the house, because I live in London and I live in America too. And so we all went back and just jammed as many people as we could into our little house and did the show acoustically, and that was with Waddy Wachtel as well. So it was Waddy and let me see, I think that was Waddy and Russell and Russ Kunkel and Leland and Pedro and Gabby. So it was everything was done in the smallest possible way, all inside the house, crushed in, and it was the most wonderful experience I've ever had, because it, all the sadness, all the disappointment, it disappeared. The wine and the champagne was flowing, and I have to say it was one of the best nights of my life. And ironically, I probably got the best reviews of my life. But that wasn't the intent. But that wasn't why we did it. But we did it so we wouldn't all be suffering. But actually, it was a really amazing thing that came from it, because it was. It's how music is meant to be heard, or rather, how the kind of music I write is meant to be heard, which is up close and personal.
Yeah.
And okay, I'd much rather be obviously playing to 8,000 people in the Albert Hall, but really nothing comes close to being in a room with someone performing acoustically, and you're there. And I feel that way when I watch other people play. It's really something quite magical and privileged. So it turned into one of the best nights of my life.
Yeah, and as you say, you were disappointed about not playing for 8,000 people at the Albert Hall, but the journalists and the audience members, probably even the musicians, were thinking, Albert Hall is always going to be there, but this is like a one-time, a spontaneous, on the fly kind of intimate. I'm sure that the journalists were going, "Oh, this is way cooler. We do the Albert Hall all the time."
Well, it was. Yeah, I mean, it's like I suppose the journalists, and I hadn't thought about this before, but it's sort of like, hang on, I'm in someone's home, in their environment where they write this music. and seeing these amazing musicians, drinking a lot of really good champagne, and here we are, you know, being given a private performance. And I think that's the feeling of when it feels magical. And I've been there myself when I felt that way with other artists. And it does feel magical because you're being given a private performance, and nothing beats that. Nothing.
Since we last spoke, you've done 2 more seasons of Christmas shows. That's also kind of a thing that started at home and then became a public thing. I assume that tradition's still going strong and you're still raising a lot of money for charity.
Yes, absolutely. Christmas Without Tears keeps building and rising and falling. This year we're sticking to 3 cities, which is basically Chicago, LA, and New Orleans, because my touring schedule is such, and Harry's too, that it gets to a point where you feel like, you know, I can't pull this all together. I am so exhausted, and I'm not complaining. It's what I asked for. It's what I got. But I don't like doing things that are anywhere near under par. So I took a couple of cities out this year so that we'd be able to do them justice, because it's a big undertaking. Yeah. And it's, you know, people in every city come out and perform and support and you know, give their talent and their generous spirit. And we raise money for the last few years. It's been for the homeless. It's been for musicians clinic down in New Orleans. It's been for mental health, which is also connected to the homeless, and for places where, you know, we need to be more aware. I don't know how, because seemingly we're losing track. Both, you know, you talk about what's going on in America. The same thing's going on in Britain, as far as we've lost the plot here. And I'm sure you know about the Grenfell Tower and the fire and everything that happens in London. That's 5 streets away from where we live in London. Yeah. And it's that thing where it's like, how long can people with money pretend that there are not the haves and have-nots, you know, and society is crumbling because of that. You know, the idea is that people who are fortunate and have money and are in a good place, they, you know, you basically help others who are more vulnerable you and less fortunate. I mean, that's the point of a civilized society. But this is me talking. You know, this is what I feel. This is what I believe. So, in that situation, I feel like with what the things that we're raising money for sure, with these Christmas shows, a lot of it is about, especially at Christmas time, it's about the homeless. It's about people who are really, really struggling, especially at Christmas time. And there's no harder time of the year. It's where it began, really, more than anything in our houses, because I find Christmas a really hard time of year. I struggle with it because my mum died just before Christmas when I was a kid. Yeah. And so it has a bittersweet flavor for me. You know, it speaks of great sadness as well as great joy, because she instilled both things in me. Yeah. And so I think it is a time when we're every so obsessed with the commerciality of it, and you forget how many lonely people there are out there, how many people whose lives are devastated, how many people are living on the streets, how many people who are lost. And I believe it's our responsibility to help those people. I really do. So it's been going strong. Started off as a way of supporting the people in New Orleans post-Katrina, because that's where we live. But then it broadened, and we really reached out and made it about these things in each city. Yeah. We found, like, I think 2 years ago we did it we did it in collaboration with the Elton John AIDS Foundation. So everything for that was about supporting the LGBT community and gay and lesbian community, and raising money for that foundation, or at least the New York show was. So it changes every year, but we look to, and that was because it fell on World AIDS Day, but we look to really good charities and organizations that can do with our help. But I can't think of any better way than having a joyful evening filled with music and people having a great time to raise money. That's my idea of a true Christmas.
Yeah, and much of what you just said, I can't think of a more perfect setup for the main topic here, which is your album Somebody's Child. The title track and many of the tracks reflect exactly what you were just describing. So let's transition over to that. I'm going to start off with some statistics. Of the 13 tracks on the album, you were the sole composer of 10 tracks. 2 tracks are covers, and 1 track, the one we opened the show with, in fact, was a co-write, which we'll elaborate on shortly. In terms of personnel, Waddy Wachtel plays guitar on 6 tracks. Russ Kunkel is drumming on 3. Tom Scott plays on 2 tracks. Friend of the show, Gabriella Swallow, adds her elegant cello to 5 tracks. So you mentioned the charity work you do at Christmas, so I'm assuming the bass position in your band is another act of charity. It's always nice to see someone give an up-and-coming youngster a chance, to cut his teeth and learn his chops. I look at your bass player, I see a lot of potential in the guy.
Yeah, he's. You mean by that? Of course, you mean Lee. Yeah, the fabulous Leland Sklar. He's remarkable. He's such a legend, and I've been a fan of his since I was a kid. Since the first time I heard him play on James Taylor, the James Taylor tracks that we were listening to as a family in the car, driving along, singing along. Little did I know it was him, of course, but he's a remarkable human being. He's. I think his gift, not only in the fact that he's one of the most superlative musicians I've ever come across, and that he comes from a classical place, as we all do. Everybody that is in my band. When I say my band, I mean my musicians that I tour with constantly. Segundo, one of the most incredible percussionists. Gabriella Swallow, Lizzie Ball. These are the core people because it's very string heavy. This record, and so invariably it's either me, Pedro, and the 2 strings, or it's me, Pedro, Lee, and the 2 strings. But it's all of us come from a classical place, and we're all people who have crossed over into jazz and everything else that you want to throw at you, and pop and anything else, and R&B, whatever it might be. But these are all people who come from that same place, and so those sensibilities are there, and the feeling is there, and the emotion is there, and the soul is there, and he's a fine example of that. And I think what makes him so remarkable as a musician, and I say he's a true musician. What I mean by that is, hopefully he'll end his days on stage playing, or in a studio doing a session or something, because that's who he is. That's who we all are. We want to basically live, eat, and breathe and die doing this thing. That's what you want to do. That's a lifer. And the thing about Lee is that he never looks back. He's recorded on 2,000 plus records, and he never looks back. If you talk to him, he can tell you about things that he's done in the past. He can tell you about his experiences, but Lee's always looking forward to the next thing that he's doing. He doesn't sit on his laurels. He doesn't like boast or talk about the stuff that he's done and with whom and he's been on tour with. That's not his thing. That's not his gig. His gig is what's next, what's in the future, what's coming up. He is constantly enthusiastic and excited about the music he plays on. And I'm just very fortunate that I got to, meet my musical mirror, I guess, or my musical match. He's one of my heroes. And that's a very, very fortunate thing in life to meet and also become such great friends and allies. So it's amazing working with him. And it's a beautiful blend between all these people that I have on the road. And it's definitely shaped, with Ariane. It's interesting, for him, because he doesn't do co-writes and stuff like that. But I felt it was necessary that was a co-write, because he was playing a riff. He was playing this beautiful riff. We had just been in Berlin together, and been looking at the wall for me for the first time. For him, he'd seen it countless times, of course. But I don't know why it took me so long to go to Berlin and see the wall. But this was only, I think, a year ago, maybe, or 2 years ago. And I'm looking, 2 years ago, and I'm looking at the wall with him. And I was just devastated by it. Isn't it ironic that I'm now, I write a song about a wall, or rather the tearing down of walls, and I saw that as being a metaphor for human relationships, because I always think that there are, in so many relationships, most of our relationships, there are people with the power and people who live in fear. And here we are in our present time talking about walls and talking about all this strangeness of building walls. It's just when the opposite should be being done. It is just the strangest thing. But it's a metaphor for relationships and the fact that we all need to assert ourselves and make our voices heard and have our needs met. And that's what that wall came to to mean for me, because it's the saddest thing you'll ever see when you see the Berlin Wall. It's just appalling when you think about building something between people and families and friends and just putting it up, and one side is free and the other are prisoners, basically. I mean, that's it. Yeah. It was just shocking to see. And so we came back to America, and we were together, and Lee was playing this riff, and I loved it so much, and that became the opening riff that you hear on Ariane, and then I just wrote the song like in nanoseconds, because it was in my mind, it was already there. It's how I write, but that he was the inspiration for it. That riff was the inspiration for it. And we've both been thinking about it. Yeah. And so that song that you would never believe would have been inspired by visiting the Berlin Wall came about. And it's what I mean. I can't say it's, that I enjoy them all, because I don't feel really that they're mine. Yeah. And that sounds weird, but I never do when I listen to my own songs, listen to my music. But I'm very proud of that song, and it's a beautiful song to play, and it has a real depth to it that I take very seriously, which is when a beautiful melody is accompanied by emotionally intelligent lyrics. So I'm very proud of that song.
Your last album, Ebb and Flow, it was like an introspective work, with a specific objective to pay tribute to the Laurel Canyon sound. But this album has a more outwardly directed point of view, and that's reflected in the visual representation as well, the artwork. So how does Somebody's Child differ conceptually from Ebb and Flow, and what was your goal with the artwork?
Well, as I was talking about before about society and what it means to me about taking care and helping people who are vulnerable in this world, as I have been vulnerable in this world as somebody, and I'm very open about this, as you know, but, I'm somebody that struggled my whole life with clinical depression and anxiety disorder, and I'm lucky enough, and I found the right people and the right medication to be a healthy person again, and in great shape right now in my life, which is unbelievable. I can tell you that right now. This is unbelievable, having spent most of my life seemingly jumping out my skin every time I phone. But it's this whole album is about noticing the important things in life, not the stuff. It's sort of like life is what happens when you're busy taking selfies. That's what we've turned into. And I'm this is all about me. I'm not pointing fingers at other people, but I do think I'm a good representation, or I'm a good representative of us all. And it is about, and it started with Somebody's Child, with the title track, of seeing this exquisite homeless black girl on the streets of New York City in Manhattan around Christmas time, when I was running around looking for presents on tour, left it too late, as usual, deep in snow, turned the corner onto Fifth Avenue, and there she was, this metaphor for everything that is wrong with society. And I thought, wearing trash bags for clothes, one as a makeshift bra, another as a skirt, in between, naked, was her giant, beautiful, pregnant belly. And she was close to giving birth. I mean, she must have been knocking on 9 months. It was ridiculous how close it was. And she's out of her mind, whether on drugs or just mentally ill. Who knows? Both probably were true. And she had this beatific smile on her face, and she was looking up at the sky and singing along to music in her own head. And I was so shocked and attracted, of course, to this exquisite vision, but the horror of it, that, of course, and seeing something that I understand, being somebody who has been so ill myself mentally, that when you see things that you recognize, it is very, very frightening, especially when you're not there anymore, and but remind you of yourself. And so I ran across the road like most people who see things that scare them do. I wanted to avoid it, and I think by the time I got to the other side of the road, I had of course, that thank God, that moment of realization where it's like, that is somebody's child. That's someone's baby on the streets, just about to give birth to another child who God knows what will happen to that child too. And it's just that sense of, I think the idea that I would run from it was extraordinarily horrific, really, but of course understandable for all of us. And we all do it when we see homeless people or people that scare us, things that frighten us. So I went back, other people went back, and they called the ambulance and got her help. But it became the template for the entire album because it was such a powerful song. And it was also about, like I said, when you're out of your illness, as I am, managing it as I do now so well, thank God, it allows you the ability to look outside yourself and to look at life, as opposed to when you're in the illness, all you do is look inwardly at yourself, because that's all you can do, because that's the nature of the illness. So I actually know I'm really well because with this album, I'm able to look outside and see the world and see the ridiculous way that we all run through life, missing the important stuff, the small stuff and the big stuff.
Well, Somebody's Child is a great track. I encourage everybody to check it out. Of course, we don't have time to play all 13 songs, but the next one I do want to play, you mentioned Somebody's Child being a string-heavy album, and that title track has no bass and drums. It's just voice, piano, and strings. Yeah. This next one does have bass and drums. In fact, the rhythm section is the section. Russ Kunkel, Lee Sklar, and Waddy Wachtel. The name of the song is "Tell All Your Children." Or can you tell us about writing that one?
Yeah, well, that's the, that's one of the what I call the clutch of social commentary songs, and that was about being in London and watching the news and hearing a global warming specialist. I think he was talking about something silly like 30 to 50 years of life as we know it, before water becomes a problem. The places we live become a problem because it will be so hot in some places, so cold in others. The melting, as we know, of the glaciers, etc. Antarctica, blah, blah, blah. So this was going on. And I have to say, hearing it, watching it, hearing that being said, is always, it makes a difference hearing it as opposed to, reading about it all the time. I read about this all the time. This man really struck a chord with me because, again, and I don't know why it is that I'm thinking about children and Somebody's Child and it keeps coming up. Maybe that's just what was in the back of my mind all the time. I don't have children myself, which is what makes it so intriguing to me, that my first thought was, what do you tell your kids about how we took care of our home, this planet? Because the planet's going to be fine. The planet will be fine. It will come back. We will not be. So my first thought was, what can you possibly tell your children about how badly we have cared for this heaven on earth, which it really is. This is it. This is our home. Who else would do that? Not animals, that's for sure. Not our fellow animals. So I decided I wanted to write a song about this, and it came out in this very sort of pseudo Marvin Gaye way, I guess, because I was always a big fan of the importance, again, of the meaning in his songs. And yet, of course, the joy of the songs that you want to sing along and dance to, and just that to me is the power when it's entertaining and informing. So that's how Tell All Your Children came about, because it's really, really serious, but it makes you want to sing along to it as well. Which I think that's the job. I think is to do both those things.
Yeah, and it's a good example of an outward song more than an inward song.
Absolutely.
It's also a good example of, I mentioned Russ, Lee, and Waddy play together. It's, it demonstrates how magically those guys can gel with each other when they are contributing to quality material, like yours is.
Thank you. And by the way, this is all live. All of these songs are recorded live with one take. So when you hear these guys playing together, especially those three, there is a lifetime of experience of them knowing each other so well and playing together. So you can feel it immediately. It's palpable.
Oh, yeah, definitely. No strings on this track, but you have some backing vocalists adding a nice texture. So let's listen. From Somebody's Child, continuing with the child theme, this is Tell All Your Children.
Man on the TV told us something that made me fall apart. told us the time was running out, friends. Unless we made a change, unless we made a start. Mothers, fathers, tell all your children where we all went so wrong. We're all looking for the answers. We're all searching for the blame. Well, let's start by looking in the mirror, 'cause inside we're all the same. Inside we're all the same.